Hey everybody, the pink project is just about complete, but before I reveal the completed Mixmaster, I want to give you a little tour of what it took to get a bucket of parts like this back together and back into a Mixmaster that is ready to serve for probably another 50 years. The parts were in excellent condition. It all came back together beautifully. So here's the process of how that went down. Final detail cleaning. This is the part nobody shows. Every crevice, every edge, every little bit of old grease or paint gone. 3 days of work and I'm still chasing dirt with Q-tips. People see the shiny mixer at the end, but this is where it actually happens. The quiet, meticulous stuff. It's not glamorous, but this is how you make sure she runs like new. You clean, you check, you polish until the Q-tip comes out white. And you don't rush it, because rushing means you'll spend the next 3 hours hunting for a screw that just launched itself across the shop. First to be reassembled is the base and upright. Every Mixmaster feels a little different. The weight, the fit, the attitude. You tighten one screw, loosen another, line up the shafts, and then suddenly everything fits right. This is where patience really pays off. It's not about speed, it's about rhythm. You can't force it, you kind of have to coax it back together. The brush ports are one of the things that prove that Sunbeam built these things to last. Sunbeam knew these carbon brushes would wear over time, so they designed an easy way for servicemen, or even a handy husband, to replace them without tearing the whole motor apart. It's one of the details that show Sunbeam never meant these mixers to be disposable. They expected them to last longer than the sum of their parts. Fortunately, the brushes are still being made today, so if one is worn to the end of its life, I can slip in a fresh pair and keep her purring for another few decades. The back plate supports the rear bearing for the drive shaft, but it does a lot more than that. It's the foundation for everything that controls speed. The governor, the dial, the electric connections all mount right here. When you set it in place, it's like closing up the back of a watch. Everything finally lines up and starts to make sense again. Those long screws that follow don't look like much, but they're what pull the whole motor assembly together. Too tight and you'll pinch the bearings. Too loose and she'll rattle every time you turn her on. Once that's snug, I move to the governor, the brains of the whole operation. It's a fiddly install, tiny screws, fragile wires, and a lot of deep breath moments. When I edit this, I'll probably speed it up a bit, because in real time, this part's mostly adjusting, testing, and adjusting again until everything feels just right. Next comes the dial mount. It has to go on before the resistor and capacitor because its screws sit underneath them. It's one of those little sequencing details you only learn by doing it wrong a few times. This mount's job is simple but crucial. It gives the MixFinder dial a place to live and connect with the governor. That way, when you turn the dial on the outside, the governor inside knows exactly how fast the motor should run. It's one of those small mechanical handshakes that makes these machines feel so well thought out. Everything fits, everything has a purpose. Once the mount is secure, it's finally time to move on to the resistor and capacitor, the real heart of the speed control. Now we're getting into what passed for electronics before transistors and circuit boards, just a resistor and a capacitor. The resistor's job is to handle excess energy when the mixer runs at lower speeds. Instead of sending that power back into the motor, it bleeds it off as heat, literally turning electricity into warmth. That's why you'll sometimes feel a little warmth around the back of these older machines after they've been running for a while. The capacitor, on the other hand, smooths out the electrical flow. It acts like a buffer, storing and releasing small bursts of energy so the motor doesn't surge or stutter as it changes speeds. Together, they gave these Mixmasters a kind of primitive intelligence, a way to regulate power mechanically and electrically long before solid state was even a phrase. The catch is, these parts are antiques themselves. You can't buy new ones, not like these. If one fails, the only way to replace it is by poaching a survivor from another old Sunbeam. So when I handle them, it's with the same care you'd give a relic. Once they're mounted, I quickly install their metal cover plate, partly to protect them and partly so I can stop worrying about them. The beater hubs are one of those steps that look simple until you try to do them. The real challenge isn't the hubs themselves. It's the tiny screws buried in the gear that have to line up with the drive shaft just right. It's a job designed for someone with smaller fingers than me. The gear has to mesh perfectly with the shaft while keeping that little square-headed screw pointed forward, ready to tighten once everything's seated. Every surface has to be spotless. Even a speck of grit could scratch the shaft over time and lock it up for good. When the hub finally slides home, you line up the dimple in the shaft with that tiny screw and tighten it down. Sunbeam made a special tool for this, a square driver just for their servicemen. But I don't have one, so a clock key does the trick beautifully. Once both hubs are set, I click in the beaters and give them a spin to make sure they don't tap each other. And then it's time for the first power-up. There's no switch yet. We haven't installed the speed control, and that's what doubles as the on-off. So the moment I plug it in, it's going to run at full speed, or it's not going to run at all. And every time there's that same flicker of doubt. I think I did everything right, didn't I? Did I double check the wiring? Are there any live leads touching the housing? Is the drive shaft clear to spin, or I'm about to hear a horrible screech? Deep breath, plug in the cord, and when she leaps to life and hums instead of sparks, that's not just relief, that's victory. That's the sound of 70-year-old engineering saying, I'm back, and I'm here for another 70 years. Now it's time to give this mixer her sense of control, the speed mechanism. The tiny steel pin I'm installing connects the springs on the governor to the ramp inside the dial. Underneath that dial, there's an arched slot, shallow at one end, deep at the other. When the pin rides in the shallowest part, the spring is pushed so far in that there's no contact. That's the off position. As the dial turns, the slot gets deeper, easing the pressure on the spring and allowing the motor to run faster. It's such an elegant bit of analog engineering. No electronics, no sensors, just pure mechanical logic that translates a twist of the wrist into variable speed. Once that pin is in place, I can install the mix finder dial itself, which completely covers the governor and ties everything together. Then comes the second power-up, and this one's the real test. This time, it's not just about running, it's about control. If the dial responds the way it should, slow to fast and back again, that's when I know the machine is not just alive, it's back in command. Here's the gear case, freshly packed with new white grease where that old black tar used to be. It's one of the most satisfying sights in the whole rebuild. All that fresh lubricant ready to keep things running smoothly for decades more. Next comes the gasket. These gaskets are amazing. Most of them survive 70 years without complaint. But if one's torn or brittle, I can make a new one by hand. Once the gasket's seated, I screw the gear case cover back into place. That cover does more than keep the grease in. It's also the mounting point for the face plate and the beater ejector assembly that comes later. Before I move on, I take a minute to wipe away every trace of stray grease. It's partly pride and partly prevention, because a clean finish means I won't be chasing smudges later. The beater ejector slides into place over the ends of the beater hubs. A beautifully simple design held by nothing more than a little bowspring, another part that Sunbeam built to last 1,000 lifetimes. Next comes the handle, which mounts directly to the faceplate. I've already polished it back from years of oxidation and handling. restoring that deep, glossy onyx finish that phenolic plastic is famous for. Before the faceplate goes on, though, there's one tiny crucial step: reinstalling the drive shaft bushing. It's a tiny plastic sleeve that sits in a hole on the gear case cover, held in place by a delicate little spring. This was a major leap forward in Sunbeam's engineering. It let the drive shaft float in perfect alignment, reducing wear and eliminating the tedious adjustments servicemen had to make on earlier models. These bushings are incredibly rare today. The only way to find one is to salvage it from another mixer. Once that's in place, I install the bearing, the return springs, and the retaining screw for the faceplate. The faceplate itself has been scrubbed clean, especially the air vents that draw cooling air through the motor. When everything's tightened down, she finally starts to look complete again, that unmistakable Mixmaster silhouette returning, equal parts art and engineering. The last little detail before calling it done is the beater height adjustment. It sits right above the stand release lever, and that lever's a reminder that, unlike KitchenAid, this mixer wasn't stuck to its stand. Sunbeam designed it to lift right off and become a hand mixer, so you could mash potatoes in the pot or whip caramel on the stove. The height adjustment controls one of Sunbeam's smartest later innovations: the addition of a tiny nylon button on the bottom of the curved beater. When the adjustment's set just right, that nylon button gently grips the bowl and causes it to rotate as the beaters spin, ensuring even mixing without any complicated gearing. It's simple, clever, and pure Sunbeam engineering. Once that's dialed in, I give the whole mixer one final wipe. Every smudge, every fingerprint, every trace of stray grease gone. There's something deeply satisfying about that last pass, the calm after the storm. And now comes the tach test. The tachometer checks the low speed. About 200 RPM is the target. Once that's set, every higher speed falls neatly into place. Watching that needle hold steady tells me everything inside, the gears, the brushes, the governor, are working together in perfect harmony. At this point, the mechanical restoration is complete. The only thing left now is to introduce her properly. So that's it. That's how we got it all back together. The next time you see it, it'll be ready for you to purchase on auntienen.com. And remember, your purchase will benefit the American Cancer Society Men Wear Pink campaign. I'll donate all of the proceeds from the sale of that mixer to that campaign to help end breast cancer.